Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives. With lots of authenticity and a touch of humor, here is your host, Steve Bisson.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. And welcome to episode 134 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I am Steve Bisson. If you haven't listened to episode 133, it's probably very important for you to listen to it because this is the first part of two of an interview with Dr. Hayden Duggan. Dr. Hayden Duggan is the founder of On-Site, which is a academy, which is for residential trauma treatment and training program for public safety personnel, police, fire, EMTs, paramedics, sheriffs, DOC. He works with everyone. And I hope you enjoyed the first part of the interview. We really talked about humbleness. We talked about he graduated from Harvard, and then we talked about a lot of different things. And then, part two, I think we're going to talk about a lot of different things, including, the 7 deadly sins for first responders. So I hope that's a good teaser for you. And here is the rest of the interview. I'm just going to interrupt you because, I thought that in 2023, and I know we're in 2024 when this is released, a few weeks ago, I got a phone call from a police officer looking for therapy. And then I say, hello. He's like, I'm John Doe. I hear you work with first responders. I don't want you to take away my gun. And I'm like,
right.
Is there a reason why I should take away your gun?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, why? And I'm like, okay, so then there won't be any reasons for me to take well, I don't understand. I said, well, you're seeking help. So you're not that far off. Like, you're not far away. So that's a good sign. And my goal as a provider is to always keep you in the community safe and taking care of the community because that's what you want.
Exactly.
But it's in 2023, probably 2024 now, I still get people who are like, oh, you're going to take my gun away, or you're going to make me lose my job as a firefighter, paramedic, EMT, whatever the case may be, or sheriff, or even the nurses and the ER docs, which we don't like. Let me not put those guys out of first responder because they are first responders.
I agree. Yep.
They have all these fears. And I'm like, no, you're calling me. That's a good sign. And we got to stop thinking that calling and getting help, and this is something that, you don't need bars to give that information to your team, is that's not what the goal is. You go see a therapist, that means you're not that far off. You need the help. If you don't go somewhere and you're doing screwed up shit, now that's a problem. And that's where that becomes more of a problem. And I tell guys, like, SISM is great. Scissors is great. Going to one session with a therapist, amazing. I'm all for that. I don't perform miracles in one session. I've never done. I tell people, like, I'm waiting on that whole thing where I put up my hand and go, all right, you're good. Next person. And then maybe I'll change jobs when I can fix everyone like that. Yeah. But the point I want to make is that when you talk about all this, is I find that our field, like the first responders field, they're like, oh, it's got to be fixed right away. And I always give this example also I gave this to one another guy. It's like, when you break your arm, it's fixed right after you go to the hospital. It's fixed. You can use your arm. And they're like, well, no, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks or whatever. Oh, so I think mental health is suddenly not a science because we're not curing you right away. It's the same exact thing.
That's a great analogy.
I give people, let's work on that stuff. And, being trauma informed, I let you talk, but now I got my verbal diarrhea is coming out.
Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve about trauma informed is people like, oh, I know about trauma. Like, that's not trauma informed. Oh yeah, but I know about trauma. No, that's not at all what that means. And we have too many people out there who like, oh yeah, I know about on-site, so I'm trauma informed. That's not even close to knowing about trauma. That's not even knowing anything about mental health. Passing the buck to on-site or Hayden is not the answer. You're part of the problem because you don't want to look at it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. And if you're a chief or someone in higher ranks that heard me say that and you feel attacked, good, I did my job.
Well, thank you for letting me tell that story. And to boil it down to its essence, I was a hair club client, and I had a event that was very obviously upsetting to me. I had help making the connection to a failed rescue that, that fire when we didn't save that child related to my own feelings about not being able to save my sister. It wasn't rocket science. It's not psychoanalysis. It was a clear connection, a sense of failure. So anyway, I did get trained. I did get sober. Tim and I decided to form a nonprofit many years ago. We didn't know what the F we were doing. And we started as all volunteers. Right. And then it grew, and we went out to Oklahoma City after the Murrah building was bombed. We did go down. We decided to call it the On-Site because we'll go if you call us, we'll go. Then we went to 9/11, 27 days, corner of West and Vesey. Then we happened to be at the marathon, Tent A, when the bombing occurred. After we got there after the bombing occurred. I don't want to misrepresent myself, but we were there until midnight. And we were in the temporary morgue, et cetera, et cetera. But why do I say that? We started a place. We created a nonprofit. We got a board of directors. Over the years, we did get contracts. God bless Boston Police, Boston EMS, Mass Department of Fire Services, Worcester EMS, now Mass State Police, as well as the Department of Corrections, all have agreements with the On-Site where the people can come free, no matter what. And then they also get our clinicians to come to them. And then this year, finally, the legislature voted to make all admissions free for Massachusetts first responders, including nurses, doctors, both pre-hospital and hospital-based services. So now everybody can come free. Right. But the rest of the services still we get compensated for going to them. So that's 30 years later. That's what happened to us as a result of the very early beginnings with Tim, who was the peer, and me, the mental person. And to this day, we're still best friends, and he's the chairman of the board. But to get back to where this comes from, there are 24 CISM teams in the Commonwealth. I serve on one, and we're all volunteer, and we're all united, somewhat loosely, by the Mass Statewide Peer Assistance Network, which all follows the same standard of care, all have monthly meetings, all require a clinical director and a peer director of the team, all require that peers are GRIN certified. That's the 3-day training course certified by the state. And if you are GRIN certified, you can get on a team. Clinicians included have to go through it. And then you will get
I'm CISM trained, so
God bless you. You get confidentiality and you get privilege, meaning that you can't be forced to testify. As long as you are disclosing this to a GRIN certified peer and a clinician in a debriefing, you cannot be forced to testify. So there are many different systems out there. Gordon Allport said the surest way to lose truth is to pretend that one wholly possesses it. There are other methods of group crisis intervention, of course. As it is right now, though, the only method that can guarantee its volunteers both confidentiality and privilege is if you're GRIN trained and you're in that state network. So we strongly believe in the state network, and the On-Site now has become really just a small, if you look at all the services as the broad edge of a funnel, you've got peers out in the street. You've got people embedded in local departments, police, fire, EMS, who are trained.
God bless for those.
You've got chaplains. Mass Corps fire chaplains are fabulous. They do excellent work. Yeah. And, that's the broad edge. Then you get to the debriefings and then the one-to-ones. And then finally you get down to the STEM. That's us. Low frequency, high intensity resource. If somebody is really in need of it, you better have it for them, because you know very well, Steve, there's that moment in time where they're willing and open to talk. And if you miss it, they seal right over. No, I'm good. No, I'm okay. You say, damn, we should have taken that person in when we could. So the On-Site's had 9,500 folks through over the last 30 years.
Wow.
We don't advertise. We don't market. We do have a 90% return to duty rate because our people want to get back on duty. We are focusing a lot now on retirees, my age and younger. I'm truly old, but a lot of them retire much younger than me. And families. That's our new focus, and we want to build a new building for it. But right now, yeah, that's where we are. We're just an extension of everything else the Mass Statewide Peer Assistance Network does out in the field, the one-to-ones, the debriefings, the response to the crisis, to the shootings or whatever. And then we're that last piece. If you need it, not many people do, you better have it for them because we lose them. As you know,
Yes.
we lose a firefighter every 3.2 days in the United States, despite all the training we have, and size up and RIT training and rescues, we still lose a firefighter every 3.2 days. Every 57 hours, we lose a cop shot in the line of duty. Still, in both emergency services, heart attack, lung disease, and cancer are the leading causes of death, and they shorten the lifespan of the average firefighter by 12 years. And police now, used to be 10 years, they've overtaken us in this current era of everybody hates cops. They have a shorter lifespan than we do. So right. It's really important that the work you do, every time we have a provider out there that understands what people are talking about and has the respect for them, just listens to them. We don't want clinicians that have to be a cop or have to be a firefighter that's not what it's about. We want the best clinician we can get, but they have to respect and understand what these people have been through. Just shut up and listen. You can't go wrong by listening. And thank God you work with cops, because we've had cops who would come into us and say, I might as well stab myself in the eye with a pencil before I'll go back to that person. That person made me feel worse when I came out than I did when I went in. So yeah, you're right. It is a specialty. Not all of us in the clinical world are trained in it, and we need training for it. But that's the overview of the on-site, where it fits, etc.
You forgot one important thing, though. I don't know what the stats are going to be for 2023, but there is a first responder, I think it's every 20 hours, that commits and completes suicide. And I'm not looking over that, because this is something that's important for people to understand, that, you said it yourself, we hate cops mentality at this point. But the stress that firefighters and police go through on a regular basis, daily basis, is something I can't even fathom. And I work in this field.
Yeah.
And I wanted to mention that too, because we're losing too many to suicide. And I want to mention that too.
No, you're absolutely right. We lose 4 to 6 times as many police officers by their own hands every year as we lose by perpetrators. The bottom line of all of these activities is suicide prevention. You're 100% right.
And I think
now, of course, it's trauma and addictions, because 87% of completed suicides involve alcohol. So for old guys like me, AA becomes just as much of a cause, because we lose people if the only tool in their toolbox is booze or opiates or whatever. And I understand it. I'd only be looking in the mirror if I didn't, but it'll kill you. So we got lots of ways to die in this gig.
What did people call it? Going to church is usually what happened after a shift.
Yeah, that's right. Choir practice.
Choir practice. Thank you. I couldn't remember the exact expression, but one of the things that I would say to you, that, and again, it may be a more, I'm not trying to be provocative here, but one of the things that really is happening is, you said it yourself, they go to a therapist who is a first responder therapist, and they go, I would never want to go. Like, how many guys come to my couches and go, okay, I was scared, because a lot of people call themselves specialists and they are truly not. And I was afraid you'd be one of those guys.
There's bucks in it now.
Right. And I think that's the problem, is that people are looking at it as a financial gain. For me, it's like, really, how do we, one of the things that comes to mind is that I can fill out, there's an insurance company, I mentioned this in the past podcast, but I'll mention it to you now, because there's an insurance company that will remain nameless that took me off their first responder specialists, because I wouldn't do their 1-hour training, which absolutely was horseshit. And it wasn't even close to what I deal with.
Yes.
So I'm like, fuck you. No,
you actually know what you're doing, as opposed to a 1-hour training course.
So for the frustrated people like me, how do we really help? Like, therapists sometimes come to me and say, gee, Steve, I really want to help first responders, but I don't want, and those are the best ones, because they're like, I know I'm not trained for it. I'm like, perfect. Let's work. I think that one of the things that I've mentioned to people, and someone mentioned it in my podcast a few months ago, one of the things is we got to let some therapists in on it. And what I mean
Yeah, we
by
do.
that,
Yeah.
we need to, like, I don't mean like I got to go live in the firehouse for 24, or I got to go do like 7 weeks of mids, or, for afternoon shifts or whatever with the police. But I think that we got to let in a little more the mental health providers and the social workers
Sure.
of this world
Yeah.
in order for them to understand. How do we get that message across
Yeah.
to a whole
Right.
lot of people? That's my question to you.
Well, that's a very good question, and we need to be inclusive. And I think that if our sort of basic vetting is, if a clinician is willing to take the CISM class as you were, that speaks volumes. I mean, maybe they're doing it to enhance their private practice, but that's okay. If they do good treatment, that's fine. But they have to be willing. That class is brutal, as you know, and has role plays in it, and you really get to hear what our folks are feeling. So somebody who's willing to do that, that's basically all we ask. And then, they can be on it. We do have a list of people who have expressed an interest in or want to do this kind of work. You asked me in the beginning, though, before the mics came on, which I didn't address at all, what other issues besides the trauma are these folks focusing with? And I first should say, Massachusetts does have that list of the 7 deadly sins based on that early survey by Mitchell, which was not, he doesn't say it was good science, it was a paper pencil questionnaire, but he did run it through the computers and we got a good order.
Right.
Exposure to line of duty death, without doubt, was the worst for any department, because we all have that fallacy of uniqueness. It can happen to thee, it can happen to thee. It's not going to happen to our department. And that was the worst. And they also said it was the worst for their families, because their families get used to seeing them going out the door. They get a little bit inured to the danger, and all of a sudden the worst happens, and they realize, holy shit, what my loved one does for a living can really bite. We could lose them. The next, interestingly, thank you for reminding us, ranked second was suicide of a working partner. And it's not like it is with civilian suicide, where we often get a lot of warning. There's gestures, overtures, cross-cutting, giving away of cherished objects. We don't get any of that. They just quietly go down some country road and hang themselves. They go down the cellar and swallow the Glock. They overdose with the opiates after wasting some drugs in the ambulance. It's so lethal. We have to move in so fast if we see signs and symptoms that we lose people. The third one was death of a child during the course of any emergency services operation. And why is that ranked right up there with the top 3? Because we all have children, or if we don't, we're close to our nieces and nephews, or we're close to our partners. We've been invited for Thanksgiving maybe over because they're young. Children aren't supposed to die. We're supposed to save them. I was supposed to save little Kimberly John. Instead, I'm shoveling her into a body bag. Right. So that's ranked 3. And of those top 3, Steve, we say we're stripped of our usual mechanisms, which is gallows humor.
Yes.
We can make a joke out of anything. And if we're not giving shit to each other, we don't like each other. You can't make line of duty death, suicide of a cherished partner, or death of a child funny. And we have our class clowns that are great. We love them in the station. They can blunt any trauma with a joke. Watch what happens if they try to make that funny. Next, and I'll be brief because we want to get to the other issues, which are the marriages and the betrayal and the administrations. But to be very brief, the next is prolonged failed rescues. Yes. Where you have extended time on scene, you do everything you know how, you come back to your chief and say, our shit didn't work. We did everything we know how, we couldn't save that person or whatever. The next, and it also has to do with length of exposure. That prolonged, that PTSD taxi meter flag is down. Sight, sound, smells, you're absorbing way too many. This is not what we call a scoop and screw or load and go. This is way too much exposure. The next is multiple casualty incidents. Not that we can't handle those. It doesn't have to be the marathon. It could be any time the incident exceeds your department's ability to handle it, like Lewiston, Maine, or whatever. But it's when you're first on the scene. It's okay if you arrive when incident command is set up. We got a command car. We got lifeline coming in. We got the fire department washing the blood off the highway. The vehicles have been separated. The ambulance has transported those that are viable. This is when you arrive on scene and you're first. You got an offset head on. You got a 13-year-old sitting in the medium, still as can be, a little bit of cerebral spinal fluid coming down. She's gone. Then you got the mother bleeding out, facial injuries, bleed a lot. She's screaming, but she's going to make it. The medics are calling on the radio, what do you got? We're just basics. They want to know how to set up the truck. It's raining, so life flight's not going to be able to land. You got nothing, and you're a little EMT firefighter arriving first on scene. People remember multiple casualty incidents when they were first on the scene because it was a cluster. They had nothing except themselves, and they're overwhelmed. They got through it, but they remember those. The next is anytime the victim. I'm almost done. Victim known to respondents.
Small towns, especially.
Absolutely. You know, in the big cities, it might be your district. It's a brother, police officer, firefighter. One of them's been trapped in an MVA. But in the small towns, you stop even referring to it by streets. You know, you say, hey, Duggan, get the ambulance, go down to, we got a baby not breathing call. I said, where is it down by where in the cul-de-sac where the old guy was smoking and he's on oxygen, parts, he blew himself to, yeah, that's where it is. We don't even refer to the street number. Yeah. We do it by the incidents because when you've been on long enough, and I know you've treated some people who have, there's not a street in the town you haven't been to for something. It might be a well-being check, or it could be an ambulance call, it could be a chimney fire, but that's how you remember the calls. And the last one, which is why I'm grateful you put up with this long list, Steve, ranked last by first responders as the least important was any incident where their personal safety was unusually jeopardized. That's what they share with combat vets. Achieve the goal, not the glory. They're mission-oriented. They don't like medals. They don't like to be called heroes. If another police officer says you did a great job, that's good. If a shrink like me says it, it doesn't mean anything because I don't do his job. I don't carry a gun. So we can help. I don't mean that we can't help, but you know that peer support is fabulous. Now, that was the list. That is the list in Massachusetts that we use for the 24 teams as a kind of, if that happened, we better keep an eye on it. We had 3 kids murdered in Duxbury. You know, just let's keep an eye on that. We don't ambulance chase. We don't chase after it, but it's perfect that we have a CISM trained police officer embedded in that department. That's great.
Right.
That, as you says, ain't what's happening predominantly now. It's cumulative stress. It's marital issues. It's relationships bombing out. We roughly have a 68 to 72% divorce rate, or I should say rate of relationship breakup, not necessarily divorce. In first relationships, the first marriages of first responders. Second marriages tend to go much better, especially if both are in the field because they just understand it. But it's a killer. It's a killer on the kids. It's a killer on the family. And self-medication goes right with that. And then on top of that, why don't we have a chief? You come in, you just lost the kid. And he says, yeah, why don't you take a few minutes and get back out there? I got another call for you. Excuse me, this gal is toast. This guy's got the 1,000-mile stare. He's someplace else. You don't want him answering that call. He's not emotionally fit. No. So, yeah, what we call administrative betrayal, unfortunately. And I'm not saying, I think I made it clear, definitely not all chiefs or all deputies or all captains. We have some that are stars. They never forgot where they came from. And I could give you names, which I can't. But then we have a lot that when they get up where the air is thin, they got stars and bars and stripes. They forgot where they came from. They become instant assholes. And they do harm. They hurt people. And it's not hard to hurt our people if you tell them that they're not doing a good job or they didn't do enough. You know, if you tell them they fucked up operation or they need to go back for retraining on this or that, yeah, okay, I got that. You tell them like you didn't care enough, you're not doing enough, you're not doing your job. That kills us. because that's all we have is our identity as a first responder. The rescue personality rescues. It doesn't lose people. So, yeah, that's a big. You're absolutely right. Relationship problems, addiction problems, administrative betrayal are just as serious as any critical incident. In fact, they are critical incidents.
This is we had a private conversation prior to this, and it's something that I tell people. I said, if you really want to know how great your department is, and name police or fire, and I'm not naming names and I'm not pointing out any departments, the chief that's going to go, hey, you know what? Got a few phone numbers. You want to call them, but that would be helpful. That's trauma informed. That's like, hey, look, we thought about it. We see that you're disturbed. Or
Right.
someone is like, my personal favorite is the best departments that I've ever seen are the chiefs. There's a small town where my kids go to school in Hopedale here.
Mhm.
And I love once in a while the chief of police and the chief of
Mhm.
fire are
Mhm.
right in the community, maybe doing the directions or just
Yes.
talking at the school or like just doing those little things. And I'm like, that's the chiefs that I want. And I'm pointing out, hey, Mark, Tom, you don't need to thank me for anything. I'm not fucking doing this for that. I'm doing this because I truly believe it is that for me, that's what embodies what's missing. When you're in a town like Worcester, you're in Lawrence, you're in Boston. I get that the chief may not be able to be hands-on because it's such a
Right.
big district.
Right.
But if you're like, I say like under 25,000, you got to catch the chief at the school once in a while and catch the chief or the deputy or the sergeants or captains for those who have them, just doing little things in the community. And to me, what that says is I haven't forgotten where I got these bars. And that's when I
right.
start on the bottom. But that's my 2 cents. I'm just a mental health counselor.
No,
I've never.
not just. No, you save lives and careers when you intervene like that. And they'll tell you that. The guy that worked with me absolutely saved my life. And he's part of why I got sober. I was in the toilet, marriage down the tubes, living by myself in a one-room apartment. Sober though, at least I
Right.
got sober. I had to start over, and that shrink absolutely saved me, no question about it. Along with CISM too,
And
no
I
question
think that
about
what I tell people too is they ask me what's the best client, like why are the clients? You mentioned something earlier which is extremely key, and for my colleagues in my field, whether it's social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, mental LMHCs, whatever you want to call them. I can't forget about my buddies at the KDAC, the Certified Alcohol and Drug
it.
Counselors.
Absolutely,
Can't
great.
forget my buddies there too. But they asked me, what's the most effective thing? I said, whenever you get a call from a first responder, return the phone call within a 48-hour period.
That's true.
And if you don't, you have fucking lost them.
Yeah, that's true.
And they say, how do you know that? I said, I don't know, 20 something years of working with this stuff. The guy who I call right back, like most of them, like they go, oh, I didn't think you'd call back. I'm
Yeah,
sorry to disappoint you guys. And they
yeah,
always laugh because they're like, oh no, it's just that. And then they cut at the end of the day, it's not you using the vernacular, but you need to know what they go through. If you don't know what roll call is, then don't say you're an expert. If you don't know what it is to be around the table after a hard call as a station, get informed, ask some guys, but don't like, oh yeah, I know what that means. I'm like, no, it means a little more than what you think.
yes,
And knowing that stare in that 1,000-mile stare, people are like, oh, that's typically trauma. And I'm like, it could be trauma, but your intervention may keep it as a stress versus just not a trauma. And it may not even be about, I tell people, it's not about the dog on the side of the road. It's about blankety blank from the past that's not even dead. It was just a loss of a relationship.
right.
As a first responder, you go through so many things that you start melting these dots together, and you
Mm-hmm.
go, how the hell did they get there? But I said, if you logically listen to them, you'll know exactly how they get there.
Exactly. And that's, when you mentioned late acts, we have 4 at the onsite, and they're absolutely fabulous. I mean, I'm in AA, and they're more up to date on substance abuse and alcohol abuse than I am. So we're looking for that next wave, the next generation that's coming along. Like you said, we want both peers and clinicians to get involved in this, get intrigued by it, to want to do it.
Right.
Our place, absolutely. Our goal is our staff. without our staff, we wouldn't have any program. They are fabulous. Most of them, not all, but most have lived through it and have been first responders. And I know you know some of them, and then went on to get their degrees and now do trauma counseling and trauma work with us. But it's a powerful program. It's not for everybody.
Right.
It is a hardcore trauma approach. And when they come in on Monday, they get a meet and greet. They meet each other, a little bit of urinary Olympics, who's done what and where have you been. And then they get a great class on trauma in the brain by Kalina, who's our clinical coordinator. And she's an Air Force brat, so she grew up in the military. And she connects with them instantly, and it's in layman's terms. They understand the impact of trauma and why it affected them. Then in the afternoon, they got Charlie Pop, who's head of the whole CISM network across the state, along with Jimmy Leary. Charlie's the fire side, Jimmy's the police side. Charlie goes through the 7 deadly sins we did. Like, okay, just you and me. I know you think this shit doesn't bother you, and I realize you don't think that's why you're here. You're here because of the marriage. But if I can just ask, have you been exposed to? And you see the head start to nod, and then we ask them just to write down just a little bit. By the time they finish that, they're toast, and that's just the first day. Second day, right out of the box, got to look in the eye of the tiger. You pick your index incident, whatever you want to talk about. That's up to you. And as a group, the staff debriefs them. They each have a different incident. In the morning, they get yoga to burn off some of that stress from a yoga instructor who only works with first responders. So she's great, first responder military. But the rest of the day, just tell the story. Yeah. We're not going to psychobabble it. We're not going to interpret it. Just get it out like oil to the surface of water. And you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but we kind of encourage you to. We don't re-traumatize people, but usually by the third day we got them because everybody else is doing it. You get that peer pressure.
There's a fellow. I'm just going to stop you. I want you to share this with you because I think you would appreciate this more than anybody else. There's a fellow therapist of mine who says you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's true, but you can make him fucking thirsty to drink that goddamn water.
That's exactly right,
and that's what you're doing. So anyway, right. Go ahead. I just had to interrupt.
You're right. We try to make them thirsty to get at the trough for sure.
Right.
And everybody else is, sharing the worst shit you can imagine. Right. And then we get to in the afternoon on Wednesday, the old man is here. And after they've done the emotional bloodletting, then it's my job on Wednesday. And I have 3 people helping me who are fabulous. And they're all experienced trauma counselors. And some are ex-first responders, ex-cops who've been through their own shoot incidents, whatever. Time to talk about, okay, so what did this do to you? You got it out, did a great job yesterday, oil to the surface of water, beginning, middle, end, what this thing was like to you, we got it. What did it do for you? And they give their thoughts about it afterwards, some of the worst images, and then we say, okay, does this relate to anything, just the theme, not the details of the incident, but when my shrink did that for me, the theme was failed rescue. And Kimberly Jolly related to something that I didn't succeed in doing when I was 8 years old. We're not trying to do psychoanalysis. I can't tell you the relief it was to me to say, okay, I'm not nuts. I'm not any less, more nuts than anybody else doing this stuff. But There's a reason why that child incident and the loss of that child in that building fucked me up to it fairly well. So that's Wednesday. We got a great AA meeting in the evening, only for those who wish. It's pretty raucous. It's a badge meeting. All people who, are on the job. Not that we're some special brand of alcoholics, Steve, who has to go to just badge meetings. No. Sometimes you can go to a civilian meeting and there's a 19-year-old kid next to you who's newly sober, just kicked heroin, and he says something that just blows your socks off. It's got so much genuineness to it. But this is a meeting just for people with a badge because they don't always want to be sitting next to somebody they just cuffed and stuffed the night before or they intubated on the way to the hospital. Right. And then Thursday, almost done, is all one-to-one, where we do the rapid eye movement stuff, as you know, and some other
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a great tool for trauma.
Thank you, sir. And we also do TFT, thought field therapy.
Oh, yes.
I have been training it, but I'm not the best at it. We have Larry Brown, who's an ex-Boston cop.
Oh, you
and
got Larry. I hate to
yeah,
say
he's
that.
fabulous.
I heard great things about Larry too.
He's unbelievable, but he's one of the best substance abuse counselors we have. He connects with people. We have IFS, Internal Family Systems. Valerie, my wife, who's the boss of the agency, she does that. She's trained in all three, so she's pretty unbeatable. And that's Thursday, really hard work. In the afternoon, you get acupuncture and you get chair massage, if you so wish, from a paramedic who's fabulous at it. And then Friday, we just can't open up anything new. I've made that mistake. It's a disaster. There's a reason why it's it is 5 days, and it's a phased process, and not everybody can do that. I get that. But if you are willing to really clean out the wound, Friday, we got to put it back together. Friday's the road back, and you write yourself a letter, which we mail to you 6 weeks later. Dear Hayden, this is what I learned at Happy Camp. The guys from Oklahoma City call it Happy Camp.
Happy Camp. Say, I love it.
Y'all ride is hard, but you don't put us away wet. That's a farming expression.
I know. I love it. I love it. I love it.
And 6 weeks later is about the length of, a New Year's resolution. You got this letter that says, oh, I promised to go to the gym 3 times a week. I promised to do a date night with my wife. I promised I'd spend more time with my kids. What happened to all that? Anyway, that's it, my friend. We have a discharge plan that is kind of detailed. That is better than anything I did at any other agency. It covers 8 major areas. They all do it together, and by that time, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. They've all gotten to know each other. They won't let each other get away with anything. But Brian, our director of the residential services, who's a retired Hull firefighter and Navy vet, all week long, he's making sure that the environment is conducive to their feeling of privacy and safety. He cooks kick-ass meals. He does do anger management with them, and he's a great AA counselor. So Brian's kind of the rock of the place in terms of the life space, where they live. A lot of people will joke with us and tell us, the real program starts when all you staff get the hell out of here after dinner when we're with each other. And lastly, they all fill out an evaluation of us when they leave. Mm-hmm. It's anonymous, but some of them like to put their names to it. What do you think they ranked as the best feature? This is over 30 years, over and over, because we do research on our own program. They ranked one thing as the most powerful thing for the whole program. We all looked at the first set of data. Was it EMDR? Was it the debriefings? Was it AA? Was it the health and wellness stuff? Was it the food? No, it was peer support. Now that's humbling. I don't understand why other group or other agencies that work with first responders don't get that joke. Of course, what you do is important. Of course, what I do is important. We're not bumps on a log, but it's a peer clinical alliance. You don't have trained peers doing that, you're going to get minimal impact. And most of the other programs, and I respect them dearly. We work a lot together. We cross-refer. Some of them. Some of them are hospital-based. Some are in Vermont. If they're not peer-based and clinically guided, it just doesn't have the same impact.
Well, I'll tell you, Hayden, what I've said in this podcast, and when people ask me, I've been asked as a therapist, what's the best therapy out there? And I always respond with the same exact thing, the therapeutic alliance. If you get along with your therapist or the person who's talking to you, they can do CBT, IFS, they can do DBT, they can do psychoanalytic. It don't matter what they do, but if you have that therapeutic alliance, it will work out great.
Right. And without that, you got nothing, as they say.
And then at the end of the day, I tell people, we're all humans who want to connect to each other.
Right.
So if you get a good therapeutic alliance, the next best thing is to have a community of like people. They don't have to be perfectly like you. They just have to be like you. And having that, I joke around that the reason why my type of therapy that I do gets along well with a buddy of mine who's a police officer is that we think kind of the same. Right. Get off your fucking ass and do shit. Right. And we don't always say it in those words. And I think that's what makes, there's days where I gotta look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, am I doing this? No, this is what works for me. And that's that
Right.
alliance with a
Right.
friend. And maybe that's why I work well with first responders in general, because for me, it's
Mhm.
like, you're right, all this is bad shit. And I agree with you. What are we going to do to
Mhm.
get out of this shit? And I'm not going to let you sit there.
Exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
that for me, at the end of the day, learning to teach people about the community, the therapeutic alliance. I like that you have acupuncture, yoga,
Mhm.
and one of the things that I've tell people is that it doesn't matter what you do as activity. And if you don't like yoga, that's fine. Then go do breathing exercise. You don't like that, go do Pilates. You don't like that, go do a spin class. I don't give a crap what you do, but you got to move. You're not going to
Yes,
get better mentally by not moving.
that's
But
right.
anyway, I
No,
feel
you're
like I took
absolutely right.
over, but I'm looking at the
You
time.
didn't
We
take
went,
over at all. No, that's a great point. And just to add to it, we didn't used to have that.
right.
And because we work with combat vets, we have a weekend every 6 weeks of folks that are in emergency services, but they also went through the military. They're
Right.
kind of, that's another duly diagnosed group. And so they came, one of the earlier groups, we started this in 2005, the tip of the spear. One of the early groups around 2009, 2010, they came to us and said, so you guys, this is a great weekend. We've enjoyed it. You guys do any yoga? Oh, no, we don't do that shit. Oh, did you have any acupuncture? No, we don't do that. Do you do any like chair massage or something like that? Because the body tenses up during combat and all this stuff. No, we don't do that. This was a Marine. He looked at me and said, well, I got to tell you something. We have that at the VA. And somehow I think if it's good enough for the U.S. Marines, it probably should be good enough for the on-site academy. I said, oops, oh shit. So now we have all those modalities because
And
they're important. They're part of wellness. So yeah.
and we can talk about, like, we're running out of time. I just realized that we've been
Sure. Thank
talking
you.
all
I'm
this
sorry.
time. No, why are you sorry? This is great.
Good.
But I want to thank you. And if you want to go talk about the military, I'd have another hour in me of just military stuff, because even though it's
Very,
similar to the first responders, there are differences. But
that would be an honor. I'd be very happy to do that on behalf of those folks.
well,
Yes.
we went over an hour, almost an hour and a half.
Well,
And I'm
thank
going to
you.
split this up in 2 interviews because I think that people will absorb it significantly better. But as I'm not going to say it's an honor because I know that makes you blush.
Mm.
I want to thank you for everything you've done. I thank you for your service. I thank you for, as a Canadian, thank you for being there for the firefighters who went through hell and back in the last 6 months to a year, which
Well,
people
thank you.
tend to forget. They complain about their clouds here. And I go like, yeah, you don't understand how big these things are. You can't fathom it. But anyway, thank you for everything you've done. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that you thank me for what I do.
Yes.
One day, Hayden, not only am we're gonna probably try to do this on the military a little bit at least.
Sure.
I'd love to go to on site and see you.
Oh,
I'd
love to
be
have
an
you.
honor. I'd be an honor, but I'll never impose myself because I know some guys want their privacy, and I respect that 100%.
We love to have you. Friday afternoons is when we generally do the visits. So, as they say, soyez le bienvenu, mon ami.
Oh, je serai là, mon ami. Yes, I will take you up on that offer. But
Okay, okay.
I just want to thank you so much, and we'll definitely get back together soon.
No, thank you for the opportunity. Very important. I appreciate it. Have a great
Welcome.
day, Steve.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Well, this concludes episode 134 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. Dr. Hayden Duggan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Probably one of the most honest, goodness, supportive, and we talked about mental health. We talked about first responders, two of my greatest passions through for the last 2 episodes, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But episode 135 is also going to be very interesting because it will be with Malka Shah. Malka Shah is going to talk a little bit about her experience also on 9/11, which I know that Dr. Hayden Duggan talked about, but we're also going to talk about the Kesher Shalom projects and a little bit of anti-Semitism stuff, and I hope you join me then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States.